The first thing you learn working overnight security at Kellerman Industrial Storage is that buildings breathe, not metaphorically. The HVAC cycling through 16 warehouses creates pressure differentials that push air through gaps in loading dock seals. And the whole complex exhales in slow mechanical rhythm between 2 and 4 in the morning. You learn to stop hearing it. You learn to stop hearing most things. The refrigerator hum in the break room, the settling of concrete pads under thermal stress, the occasional rat triggering a motion sensor on the east perimeter. $12.60 an hour buys a lot of learning to unhear. My name is Owen Marsh. I was 43 years old, divorced twice, and the only item on my professional resume that hadn't expired was a Class D security license from the state of Georgia. Kellerman hired me because I could stay awake, because I didn't drink on shift anymore, and because nobody else wanted a permanent Thursday through Sunday overnight rotation at a facility storing agricultural equipment and frozen poultry pellets for regional distributors. I had been there 11 months. I knew every camera angle. I knew which ones had dead zones. I knew that camera 14 on Warehouse J drifted left about 3 degrees every week and needed manual correction. I knew that the parking lot sodium lamps on the north side flickered when the transformer got cold, and that it meant nothing. I'm telling you what I knew, so you'll understand what I didn't. November 8th was a Thursday. My shift started at 10 p.m. I relieved Darren Kirksey, who worked the swing shift, and always left the logbook open to the wrong page. He said nothing unusual. I said goodnight. He drove off in his Tacoma, and I locked the pedestrian gate behind him and walked back to the monitoring room, which was a 12 by 14 cinder block box attached to the main office building, heated by a space heater that corporate told me not to use and that I used every night. The monitoring wall held 20 screens arranged 4 by 5. Most of them showed gray concrete, gray asphalt, gray chain link. At night, the infrared cameras rendered everything in that swimming green-gray monochrome. I settled into my chair. I poured coffee from the thermos I'd filled at the gas station on Buford Highway. I logged my start time. At 10:47 p.m., I noticed movement on camera 6, which covered the south loading apron of Warehouse D. A man was walking along the fence line outside the property. This was unusual only because of the hour, and the location, the nearest bus stop, was a half-mile east. And the road shoulder on that stretch had no sidewalk. He moved erratically. I noted it in the log. 10:47. Individual on south perimeter appears intoxicated, moving west. He disappeared off camera. I didn't think about him again for 20 minutes. At 11:09, camera 11 picked up 3 more figures on the east tree line. They were not walking along the road. They were standing just inside the tree break, facing the fence, motionless. The infrared rendered them as bright silhouettes, warm bodies against cool foliage. I leaned forward. There was no reason for 3 people to stand in the trees at 11 p.m., staring at a poultry storage warehouse. I toggled to camera 12 for an adjacent angle and counted 2 more. 5 people in the trees, unmoving, facing inward. I picked up the desk phone and called the Gwinnett County non-emergency line. The recording told me all operators were assisting other callers and estimated a 40-minute hold. I hung up. I tried again. Same recording. I called 911. The line rang 19 times without answer. I remember counting. I set the phone down and looked at the screens. The 5 figures hadn't moved. And on camera 6, the first man had come back. He was standing at the fence now. His fingers were laced through the chain link. His head was tilted at an angle that didn't look voluntary. I locked the monitoring room door. That was instinct, not protocol. I want to be clear about what I did not know that night. I did not know that anything was happening beyond Kellerman's perimeter. I had no radio tuned to news. My phone got terrible reception inside the cinderblock room, 1 bar on a good night. And I didn't browse the internet on shift because the facility Wi-Fi required a login I'd never been given. My entire informational universe was 20 camera feeds covering roughly 18 acres of industrial property, a desk phone, and whatever Darren had written in the logbook. Darren had written all clear. By 11:30, I counted 11 figures visible across 4 cameras. Most were at the east tree line. 2 had joined the man at the south fence. They stood with that same quality, not aggressive, not purposeful, just arrived, like they'd been delivered to those positions and hadn't yet received further instruction. I should have been more frightened. Instead, I felt that particular confusion that comes before fear, the brain's protest that reality is failing to match any available template. I tried 911 again. This time I got a busy signal, not a recording. A busy signal, like it was 1987 and everyone in the county had picked up their phone at once. I called my site supervisor, Victor Peralta. Victor answered on the second ring. His voice was tight and too fast. "Owen, you at the facility?" "Yeah. Vic, I've got people on the perimeter. Maybe a dozen. They're just standing there." "Lock everything. Do not go outside. Do not approach anyone. I'm listening. Turn on a radio if you have one." "I don't have one." "There's something happening. Citywide. The news is saying it's a contamination event. Some kind of outbreak. People are getting violent. The highways are..." He stopped. I heard his wife Maria say something urgent in the background. "Owen, just stay inside. Don't let anyone in. I can't come there tonight. The roads are already..." The call dropped. I tried calling back 4 times. It never connected again. I sat in the orange glow of my space heater and looked at my 20 screens. The figures on the perimeter had not moved. But now, camera 3. The front gate showed a car stopped in the middle of Kellerman Drive. Both doors open. No one inside. The headlights were still on, cutting 2 white channels through the dark. At 11:52, the man on camera 6 began climbing the fence. His movements were wrong. Not the scrambling of an intoxicated person trying to haul himself over chain link. His limbs moved in isolated sequence, left hand up, right hand up, left foot planted, right foot planted, like a body being operated by someone who understood the mechanics, but not the instinct. He crested the razor wire without flinching. I saw the barbs drag through his forearm. The infrared showed no heat bloom from bleeding, which should have been impossible. Warm blood reads white on thermal imaging. His arm stayed the same flat gray as the metal. He dropped to the inside and stood upright and looked directly at camera 6, not near it, at the lens, as if he knew it was there, as if he knew I was behind it. I understood then, with the plain animal certainty that bypasses analysis, that whatever this was not intoxication, not protest, not trespass. This was new. This was outside every template I carried. I moved to the door and double-checked the deadbolt. I inventoried the room. Desk phone, space heater, thermos, flashlight, my collapsible baton, the heavy maglite in the drawer. No firearm. Kellerman didn't arm their guards. I had walls, locks, cameras, and nothing else. The man on camera 6 didn't come toward the monitoring room. He walked north, toward Warehouse J, and the figures in the trees began to climb too. By midnight, I had counted 31 individuals inside the perimeter. They'd come over the fence at multiple points, east, south, and now west. They moved in that same disjointed sequence, limbs firing one at a time, heads fixed forward. None of them ran. None of them vocalized. They spread across the lot like water finding its level, drifting between the warehouse buildings with no apparent coordination. But they avoided the east wing. I didn't notice this immediately. I was watching all 20 screens in a state of compressed panic, trying to track individual figures, trying to see if any were approaching the monitoring room. It was camera 16 that made me stop cycling. Camera 16 covered the east approach to warehouses H-I and J, 3 connected structures that formed the oldest section of the complex, built in the late 1970s, before Kellerman bought the property. The corridor between them created a long concrete alley that connected to an interior loading bay. Nothing walked into that alley. I watched a figure approach from the south lot, moving in its mechanical drift toward the alley mouth, then stop. It stood for perhaps 10 seconds. Then it turned, not a casual redirection, but a full body rotation, stiff as a turret, and walked back the way it had come. I watched it happen twice more on other figures. They'd move toward the east wing and then deflect, like a current encountering a wall. I toggled camera 14, the one that watched Warehouse J's loading dock directly. The image was dim, grainier than the newer cameras. The dock doors were down. The personnel door was closed. Nothing was visible except concrete and the edge of a dumpster. But the timestamp on camera 14 was wrong. Every other camera read 12:07. Camera 14 read 3:41. I blinked. I looked away, looked back. Still 3:41. The feed was live. I could see the loading dock lights swaying in wind that was blowing right now, matching the wind I could hear outside my walls. The image was real time, but the clock was 3.5 hours ahead. I told myself it was a glitch. Camera 14 had always been problematic. The drift, the flickering, maybe the internal clock had failed. Except I'd corrected that clock manually every Monday for 11 months. It had never jumped forward. It had never done anything except drift left. I wrote in the log, 12:07, camera 14 timestamp anomaly, displaying 3:41 a.m. I don't know why I kept logging. Force of habit. The idea that someone would read it later. The idea that later still existed. At 12:14, a new figure appeared on camera 14. Not outside the loading dock. Inside the frame, already there, as if it had been standing just outside the camera's field and stepped laterally into view. It was not one of the perimeter intruders. I knew this immediately because of how it moved. The things outside moved in mechanical isolation, each limb separately, like puppets on individual strings. This figure moved with fluid coherence. It walked the way a person walks when they know exactly where they're going and have no need to rush. It wore what appeared to be coveralls, dark, possibly navy. It walked to the loading dock door and placed one hand flat against the metal. Every intruder on every other camera stopped moving simultaneously. All of them. 31 figures across 16 acres froze in the same instant, mid-stride, caught between steps. The image looked like a photograph. Only the timestamp counters confirmed the feeds were live. They held that freeze for 11 seconds. I counted because counting was the only thing I could do. Then they all turned toward the east wing. Every single one. 31 heads rotating to face the same direction. And then they turned away and resumed walking, but now their paths curved outward, arcing away from the east wing, giving it wider berth than before. The figure on camera 14 removed its hand from the door. The timestamp still read 3:41. I stayed in the monitoring room for the next 2 hours and 12 minutes. During that time, the following things happened outside. The number of perimeter intruders grew to approximately 50. A second abandoned car appeared on Kellerman Drive. Distant sounds reached me through the walls, not screaming exactly, but a low collective moan that rose and fell without rhythm, coming from the direction of the highway interchange, a quarter-mile south. The power flickered twice, but held. I charged my phone to 11%, enough to see 12 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and one text from my sister in Alabama. "Owen, are you safe? Please call me, please." I did not call her. I couldn't get a signal. During those same 2 hours, the following things happened on camera 14. The figure in coveralls walked a slow, repeated circuit of Warehouse J's loading dock. Every 22 minutes, exactly 22 minutes, it passed through the frame. Each time it appeared, its posture had changed. First upright, then with its head slightly cocked, then with both arms extended at its sides, palms facing the camera, then with one hand raised, index finger pointing at the lens. At me. The timestamp on camera 14 did not change. It remained fixed at 3:41 a.m., while every other camera progressed through 100, 1:30, 2 o'clock in normal real-time sequence. At 2:14 a.m., real time, according to the other 19 cameras, I heard a knock on the monitoring room door. 3 knocks, measured, human paced. Then a voice. "Hello. Please, is someone in there? Please help us." A woman's voice. Mid-30s maybe. Southern accent, local. Terrified in the way that's past screaming and into the flat, dead voice territory where the body has exhausted its capacity for alarm and converted to pure appeal. I looked at camera 2, which covered the office building entrance and the approach to the monitoring room. I could see her. A woman in a dark jacket, clutching the hand of a boy maybe 9 or 10 pressed against the monitoring room door. Behind them, 30 feet back, I could see 2 of the intruders standing motionless in the parking lot, faces turned in their direction. I opened the door. Her name was Celia Watkins. Her son was Briar. They'd been driving home from her mother's house in Dacula when traffic stopped on Highway 316 and people began abandoning their cars. She'd run with Briar through the trees and found the Kellerman fence and followed it until she found the gate, which was locked, and then followed the fence further until she found a section where the razor wire had been torn down by the climbing intruders. She'd come through the gap. She'd seen the monitoring room light. "Those people out there," she said, sitting on the floor with Briar pulled against her chest. The boy hadn't spoken. His eyes were open and fixed on a point approximately 2 feet in front of his face. "They didn't chase us. They just watched. They watched us walk past them." "I know," I said. "They're not coming toward this building either. I don't know why." "My phone is dead," she said. "Is help coming?" I didn't answer that. I gave Briar a cup of water from the cooler, and I let Celia sit where she was, and I went back to the screens. The 2 intruders who'd been watching them had resumed their drift. Nothing had changed, except camera 14, where the figure in coveralls was now standing still, facing the lens, and its mouth was open, not in a scream or snarl, open in the shape of speech, like it was talking to me through the glass. At 2:40, I made a decision. I told Celia I needed to check something at the East Wing. She looked at me like I'd proposed swimming across the Atlantic. "You're going out there?" "Those things outside, whatever they are, they don't go near the east side. Watch." I pointed at the screens. I showed her the patterns I'd observed. The avoidance arcs, the deflection. "That whole wing, warehouses H through J, nothing goes near it." "That's why you want to go toward it?" was a fair question. I didn't have a fair answer. What I had was camera 14, its frozen timestamp, its pointing figure, and a feeling not instinct, not logic, something between the two, that whatever was keeping the infected away was doing it on purpose. And that purpose had something to do with me being the one watching. "Stay here," I said. "Keep this door locked. Don't open it for anyone except me. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, you take my keys." I pulled the facility ring from my belt and set it on the desk. "And you get in the patrol truck parked behind this building and you drive through the front gate. The truck key is the blue one. The gate key is the brass one with the square head. You drive north. Don't take the highway." "Owen." She said my name with a weight that meant, "Don't do this." 20 minutes. I took the maglite. I took the baton. I unlocked the door and stepped into the November air and locked it behind me. The night smelled wrong. Underneath the usual cold asphalt and pine was something biological, sweet and heavy like a butcher's shop left open in summer. I couldn't see the source. I couldn't see much. The sodium lamps on the north lot were out now, and the only illumination came from the office building's security floods and the distant yellow glow of the east loading dock lamp. I walked east. I kept to the building walls, sliding along the office block's exterior, then crossing a 20-foot open gap to Warehouse F. Then along F's south face toward the alley that led to the older east section. My footsteps sounded enormous. Every scuff on concrete seemed to broadcast. I saw them, 3 of them, 40 yards north, drifting between G and D. They were facing away from me. Their bodies had that locked quality, each vertebra visible as a separate hinge. One of them hitched in its stride as I watched, left leg lifting too high, like a horse clearing an obstacle that wasn't there. I moved faster. The alley between Warehouse H and Warehouse 1 opened ahead of me. Concrete walls on both sides, 20 feet apart, 70 feet long, opening onto the shared loading bay at the far end. The loading dock lamp at the bay's threshold cast a yellow pool. I stepped into the alley. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, a wall of cold, 10 degrees at least, instant. My breath steamed. The mag light beam wavered because my hand was shaking. Halfway through the alley, I stopped. Because the figure was there, standing at the far end, at the bay threshold, lit from behind by the loading dock lamp. Coveralls, hands at its sides, head level, watching me. It was not one of them. I knew this the way you know the difference between a dog and a wolf before your conscious mind catalogs the differences. Everything about its stillness was chosen. The things outside were mechanical, interrupted, broken at the signal level. This was whole. This was complete. This was something that had decided to stand exactly there and wait exactly this long. And it had been right about when I would come. It spoke. Not with the moan of the things in the lot. Not with the wet mechanical drone I'd been hearing from the highway. A human voice. Male, calm, mid-register. Like a man answering a phone he'd been expecting to ring. Owen Marsh. Shift started at 10, logged 11 individuals at 11:30. Called Victor Peralta. Let Celia Watkins in at 2:14. Correct so far? I didn't answer. My legs wanted to run. My brain had stalled between the impossibility of what was happening and the absolute coherence with which it was happening. You're wondering why they don't come to this side. The figure hadn't moved. Its mouth was visible now, backlit, jaw working normally. Not the dislocated gape of the infected. A person's jaw, speaking person's words. You're wondering if whatever keeps them away will keep you safe or make you worse. Those are the right questions. You're asking them in the wrong order. What are you? My voice came out level. I was surprised by that. You have cameras. You've been watching. What do you think I am? I think you're why they don't come here. Yes. Are you what started this? The figure paused. For the first time, something shifted in its posture, a slight tilt, almost quizzical, like I'd said something more interesting than expected. No, I'm what comes after they. It gestured vaguely toward the lot, toward the moaning distance. Are the breaking. I'm the one who moves into what they leave behind. Different function, different appetite. Appetite? Everything eats, Owen. Those things eat bodies, crude, wasteful. I eat what's left when the body is gone. The space a person used to fill, the shape of their absence, their role, their keys. It pointed at me, at my empty belt where the key ring had been. You understand territory. That's your job. You stand in a space, and your presence means no one else can be there. That's all I do. Larger scale. I processed this in pieces. Each sentence landed separately, like rounds hitting a vest impact without penetration. Not yet. The bruise coming later. You're telling me you're going to take over? I'm telling you I already have. This building, these 18 acres, everything inside this fence is mine, the way your monitoring room is yours. And the same way you keep your room, by being present, by watching, by excluding what doesn't belong, I keep this. It stepped forward. One step. Its face caught the light. Male, middle-aged, ordinary features. A face you'd see at a gas station and forget. The things out there know. That's why they don't come. They're not afraid of me. They just know there's nothing left here for them to eat. I've already filled the space. The people in my monitoring room are in my space. Yes, Celia and Briar Watkins. Alive, warm, under my roof now. The same way the frozen poultry in Warehouse C is under your watch. You don't eat the poultry, Owen. It's not yours to eat. But it's yours to inventory, to know, to account for. Another step closer. I need a security guard. The sentence landed. The silence after it opened like a hole in the floor. You need someone to watch the cameras, I said. I need someone to choose who comes in and who doesn't. I walked back to the monitoring room. The figure didn't follow. It stayed at the loading bay threshold and watched me go with the patience of something that had nowhere else to be. The 3 infected in the north lot were still there, still drifting, still avoiding the east wing by a wide margin. They didn't react to me. I passed within 30 yards of one, and it continued its mechanical circuit like I was furniture. When I got back, Celia opened the door before I knocked. She'd been watching camera 5, the one covering the approach from the east, and seen me coming. Briar was asleep on the floor, wrapped in the emergency blanket from the first aid kit. What happened? She said. What's over there? I sat down in my chair. I looked at camera 14. The figure was no longer visible on it. The timestamp now read 2:58 a.m. Correct. Synchronized with every other camera. As if the conversation had resolved whatever temporal dislocation had been advertising its presence all night. There's something living in the east wing, I said. Not one of them. Something else. It says it's why they don't come here. Celia stared at me. It says? It talks. It thinks. It knows our names. She sat on the edge of the desk. Her hand found Briar's shoulder, resting there like a sensor confirming his continued reality. What does it want? I told her. I told her everything it said, word for word. because I'd already replayed it so many times in the 40-yard walk back that it was engraved. I told her about territory, about appetite, about filling the space a person leaves behind, about needing a security guard. You said no. I didn't say anything. I walked away. That's not no, Owen. She was right. Walking away from something that lets you walk away is not the same as refusal. It's deferral. And deferral, with something that patient, is practically acceptance in installments. We sat in silence for a while. The screens showed the infected still wandering, still avoiding the east wing, still ignoring the monitoring room. I began to wonder about that, why they ignored us too. We were inside the fence. We were alive. But they passed by like we weren't here, because we were inside its territory, under its roof, already inventoried. At 3:20, a new figure appeared on camera 3. Not infected. A man running. Full sprint, arms pumping, sneakers slapping asphalt. Behind him, 3 of the infected in pursuit, moving faster than I'd seen them move before. That mechanical stride lengthened into something loping and predatory. The man hit the locked front gate and grabbed the chain link and screamed. I could hear it through the walls, a raw animal sound. I was on my feet. Celia was on her feet. We both looked at the screen. The man was climbing. The infected were 20 yards behind him. He got one leg over the top. The razor wire caught his jeans, tore fabric, and tumbled down the inside. He landed hard, scrambled up, ran straight toward the office building. The 3 pursuing infected hit the fence and stopped. They pressed against the chain link the way the first man had hours ago, fingers laced through, heads tilted. But they didn't climb. They stood there, and after perhaps 15 seconds, they turned away, walked off, deflected. The same way everything deflected from the east wing. The whole property was the buffer zone now. Not just the east wing, everything inside the fence. The runner's name was Marcus Hayes. He was 26, worked at the Amazon warehouse 3 miles south. Had been on shift when people started attacking each other in the break room. He'd run. He'd been running for over an hour. His sneakers were soaked with something dark that wasn't rain. I saw the fence, he gasped, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. I saw them stop. Why did they stop? What is this place? I gave him water. I didn't answer the question. Celia gave me a look that meant, "Are you going to tell him?" And I gave her a look back that meant not yet. By 4 a.m., we had 5 people in the monitoring room. After Marcus, a couple, Diane and Russ Tremblay, had appeared at the east perimeter, moving slowly, Diane limping on a badly twisted ankle. They'd seen the infected avoiding the fence line and reasoned that whatever repelled them might shelter humans. They were right. They came through a gap in the fence where the infected had torn the wire hours earlier. And the moment they crossed the property line, the 2 figures nearest them disengaged and drifted away. 5 people. Celia and Briar, Marcus, Diane, and Russ. In a 12 by 14 room watching 20 cameras that showed a world coming apart at the seams. The highway sound had gotten louder. Not moaning now, but a sustained drone, mechanical and organic blended. Like 1,000 engines idling while 1,000 throats hummed the same note. I watched the screens. The infected population outside the fence had grown. I could see dozens on camera 3 now, milling along Kellerman Drive. More in the tree line, more on the access road, but none inside the fence. The property perimeter had become a hard boundary, absolute, inviolate. Whatever the thing in the east wing was doing, it was doing it for the whole 18 acres now. This should have been pure relief. We were safe. 5 people inside a bubble that the outbreak couldn't penetrate. But relief isn't what I felt. What I felt was the weight of camera 14, now showing normal footage, normal timestamps, an empty loading dock with nothing visible, and the memory of that voice saying, "I need someone to choose who comes in." Because people would keep coming. The infected were growing in number outside, and anyone alive and running would eventually find this fence the way Marcus found it, the way Diane and Russ found it. They would see the infected refusing to enter, and they would climb in, seeking safety. And each one who arrived would be another person under that roof, another item in the inventory, another body in a territory that something was filling with its presence, the way a landlord fills units. At 4:30, camera 8 showed 2 more people at the west fence. A man and a teenager, his daughter maybe, climbing carefully over the torn wire. The nearest infected watched them go and didn't follow. I saw the man help the girl down on the inside, and I saw them start walking toward the office building, toward the only visible light in the complex. Celia said, "More coming." "Yeah." "Owen." She turned from the screens. Briar was still asleep, miraculously. What happens when it's not 5 people? What happens when it's 50, 100? Where do they go? What do they eat? Who decides? I looked at camera 14. The loading dock, empty. "He already told me who decides," I said. The man's name was Carl Jessup. His daughter was Lainey, 15. Silent the way Briar had been silent, a closed system processing too much input by refusing all output. I opened the monitoring room door for them. I gave them water. I pointed to a clear space on the floor. The room was getting crowded. Russ Tremblay, who'd been an EMT before an injury put him on disability, checked Diane's ankle and declared it a sprain, not a break. Marcus paced. Celia watched me with that steady, evaluating attention that I was beginning to understand was her permanent setting. She noticed things the way I noticed cameras, by professional reflex. At 5:15, I made my second trip to the East Wing. I told no one. Celia was dozing. Briar had woken up and she was holding him, both of them drifting. Marcus was in the bathroom. Carl and Lainey were silent in their corner. Diane and Russ were murmuring to each other about her pain level. I slipped out the back and walked east. This time, the cold wall hit me at the alley entrance, just like before. But the figure wasn't at the far end. It was closer, 10 feet inside the alley mouth, leaning against the wall of Warehouse H with its arms crossed, waiting, casual, like a colleague meeting me for a smoke break. 7, it said. By morning you'll have more. The living find territory the way water finds low ground. What do you want me to do? What you were hired to do. Watch. Decide who enters. Maintain the perimeter. I wasn't hired by you. Kellerman Industrial Storage no longer exists, Owen. The LLC dissolved when its officers stopped being people with legal standing. Your employment contract is with a dead entity. I'm offering a new one. I leaned against the opposite wall. The cold was brutal, deep-bone cold, the kind that makes your joints ache, but I stayed. When you say you eat the space people leave behind, what does that mean for the living people inside your fence? Living people don't leave space behind. They fill it. They're useful to me the same way inventory is useful to you. Not as food, as purpose. A territory with nothing in it isn't territory. It's just ground. I need what you need, a reason to watch, a thing to guard. And if I say no? The figure unfolded its arms, stood straight, looked at me with that ordinary gas station face and eyes that held nothing, not malice, not warmth, not even the performed neutrality of a person hiding emotion. Just function, purpose without personality. Then you're a guard who quit. The fence still holds. The living still come. But no one decides who enters, and no one maintains order. And eventually, the living inside do what the living always do, without structure. They break into factions. They hoard. They fight. Some of them die. And when they die, a pause, the first I'd heard that felt genuinely meaningful. They leave space behind, and I fill it. So either you maintain them, or I inherit them. One of these outcomes involves you choosing. The other involves me. By dawn, there were 19 people inside the fence. I knew this because I counted them on camera. 19 living and breathing humans who had found their way to the only safe acreage in apparently the entire southeastern Gwinnett County area. The monitoring room couldn't hold them all. Groups had formed, some in the office building's main lobby, some in Warehouse F, where a loading bay door could be raised to let in light. They organized themselves loosely. Water from the building's still functioning supply. Vending machines broken open. A tentative social structure assembling from shock. I hadn't slept. I was running on thermos coffee and the peculiar crystalline alertness that comes from sustained adrenaline. Finally metabolizing into something like its opposite. A vibrating exhaustion that refuses to permit rest. I sat at my screens and I watched. Not just the perimeter now, the interior too. My people. That's how I was already thinking of them. And I hated myself for the possessive pronoun. At 7:48 a.m., camera 9 showed a woman at the south fence. She was alone. She was running. Behind her, far behind, maybe 50 yards, a cluster of 5 infected in that loping, predatory stride I'd seen before. She was going to make it. The math was clear. She'd reach the fence with 20 seconds to spare, she'd climb, she'd fall inside, and the infected would stop at the boundary the way all of them did. But camera 9 also showed me something else. Her left arm hung wrong, not broken wrong, bitten wrong. Dark staining from the elbow down, fabric torn, and the way she ran favored that side, guarding it against her body, keeping it still while the rest of her pumped. She'd been caught at some point in her flight. Something had gotten its teeth into her. I watched her reach the fence, watched her begin to climb one-handed, legs doing most of the work, that dark arm tucked against her ribs. The infected behind her slowed, stopped, turned away. The boundary held. She crested the wire and dropped inside and lay on the asphalt, breathing in ragged gasps. Celia was beside me. She'd seen it too. Owen. I know. Her arm. I know. The woman, I'd learned her name was Patrice Devereaux, lay on the asphalt for 2 minutes and then got up and began walking toward the buildings, toward the others, toward the 19 living people who were alive because the fence kept the infected out. This was the choice. The one the figure in the east wing had laid at my feet like a tool beside my hand. Not whether to help or to refuse help, nothing that clean. Whether to let in someone who was still running, still human, still pleading with every stride of her body for safety, but who carried in her blood the very thing the fence excluded. I was moving before I decided. Out the door, across the lot, intercepting her near Warehouse F's north corner. She saw me, saw the uniform, the badge, the mag light on my belt. And her face opened with relief, so raw, it was nearly unbearable to witness. "Please," she said. "Please, they're everywhere. I've been running since—" "Your arm," I said. "Show me your arm." The relief closed. Something harder moved behind her eyes. She pulled the arm tighter against her body. "It's nothing. I caught it on the fence. The wire?" "That's not fence wire damage. Let me see." She stared at me. I stared back. Between us, the entire moral architecture of the situation trembled. Duty of care, self-preservation, the 19 other people depending on this boundary to mean something. And behind it all, the knowledge that something in the East Wing was watching this moment, had perhaps engineered this moment, was learning something about me from what I did next. I didn't turn her away. I need you to understand what I did instead, and why it matters, and why it's the thing I carry now, like a stone sewn into my jacket lining. I walked Patrice Devereaux to Warehouse B, the one farthest from the occupied buildings, farthest from the East Wing, an isolated structure at the northwest corner of the property. I opened the personnel door with my master key. I walked her inside. I showed her the utility sink with running water. I found a first aid kit mounted on the wall. I set out a case of water bottles from a pallet stored inside. I found a tarpaulin and folded it into a rough bedding shape. "You stay here," I said. "I'll bring food. I'll check on you every 2 hours. But you don't leave this building. You don't go near the others." Her eyes. God. Her eyes held a perfect understanding of what I was doing and what it meant and what I was not saying. "How long?" "I don't know. If it's just a bite, if it doesn't, I don't know how this works. Nobody does. Maybe it doesn't turn into anything. Maybe you're fine in a day. And if I'm not fine, then you're in here. And they're out there, and the door is locked." She sat on the tarpaulin. She held her wounded arm and looked up at me with the expression of someone who has been given exactly enough mercy to know how much was withheld. "Thank you," she said. It was the worst thank you I've ever received. I locked Warehouse B from the outside. I pocketed the key. I walked back to the monitoring room. Celia was at the screens, watching. She'd seen everything on camera. She didn't speak when I came in. She just moved aside so I could sit. After a while, she said, "What if she's fine?" Then I let her out. "What if she's not?" "Then the door stays locked. And if more come, like her, bitten but still running?" I looked at camera 14. The East Wing loading dock. Still empty. Still normal. No figure. No temporal anomaly. Just concrete and shadow and the yellow lamp. But I felt it watching the way you feel someone's gaze on the back of your neck in a crowd. It didn't need to appear. It had already said everything necessary. The rest was just me making choices in a building that fed on the architecture of those choices. At 9:30, I checked camera 19, the one covering Warehouse B's interior. Patrice was sitting where I'd left her. She was unwrapping her arm, examining the wound in the thin light. It looked dark, swollen, but she was moving normally. She was alive. She was human. At 11:45, I checked again. She was lying down. Still breathing, I could see the tarp rising and falling. The arm was rewrapped. A water bottle was open beside her, half empty. At 2:15 p.m., I checked again. She was standing, facing the camera, not moving, just standing there, facing the lens, the way the man on camera 6 had faced the lens 12 hours earlier, when the night was just beginning, and I didn't yet know what any of this meant. Her left arm hung at her side. The dark staining had spread to her shoulder. I didn't go to Warehouse B. There was nothing to do there that wouldn't make things worse. I watched camera 19, and I saw what was happening, and I didn't go. At 3:40 p.m., Patrice Devereaux stopped moving with human coherence. Her limbs began to fire in isolation, the same mechanical sequencing I'd seen in every infected body. She walked to the door, tried the handle. The lock held. She walked to the wall, stood against it, walked to the door, tried the handle. The lock held. A loop, mindless, repetitive. She was gone. 27 people now occupied the safe zone. 8 more had arrived during the day, finding the fence, climbing in, drawn by the miracle of a boundary the dead respected. I directed them to the office building and warehouse F. I distributed what food existed. Russ organized a medical station. Marcus and Carl reinforced the fence gaps with wire from a maintenance supply closet. Celia, without being asked, became my second set of eyes on the monitoring wall. By nightfall of the second day, we had structure. We had roles. We had a functioning community of the terrified and the lucky, held together by walls and the unexplainable mercy of a perimeter that kept death out. And beneath it all, unspoken, the East Wing sat quiet and cold and patient. Its occupant, invisible on every camera. Its presence felt only in the absolute absence of threat from outside. I made my third visit at 11 p.m. The cold wall, the alley, the figure, this time sitting on the loading dock edge with its legs dangling. That ordinary face looking up at me with something that, in a human, I'd have called approval. You kept her separate, it said. You quarantined without killing. You maintained the population while managing the risk. That's good, Owen. She turned. She's locked in warehouse B. Yes. And when a guard finds a pest in the building, what does he do? I'm not killing her. I didn't ask you to. She's in a locked room. She's contained. She's not a person anymore. She's not leaving space I can fill. She's not useful to me, and she's not threatening to you. She's just stored, the way you store anything inert. I felt sick. Not from what it was saying, but from how reasonable it sounded. From how closely it mirrored what I'd already decided on my own before I ever walked over here. Quarantine, containment. Lock the door. Don't think about what's inside. That was my logic. I'd built it independently. The thing in the East Wing hadn't whispered it to me in my sleep. It hadn't manipulated me into the choice. It had just known what I would choose, because it understood the kind of person who works security, someone who thinks in boundaries. Access control, who goes where, who gets in, who stays out. More will come bitten, I said. Yes. And I'll do the same thing. Will you? 3 weeks. That's how long we lasted as something functional. 22 days of a community growing inside the Kellerman fence, topping out at 63 people, stabilizing, organizing itself into the crude machinery of survival. Russ ran medical. Marcus and Carl ran perimeter maintenance. Celia became my operations partner, watching cameras while I slept in 4-hour shifts on the monitoring room floor. Diane, despite her ankle, organized food rationing when a supply run to the nearby Publix distribution center yielded 3 truckloads of canned goods. We had water, we had shelter, we had walls, we had each other. We had me, making decisions at the gate. That's what it became. The gate, not metaphorical, literal. Carl and Marcus built a functional checkpoint at the main entrance, reinforced with warehouse racking and razor wire, with a clear approach lane visible on camera 3. People came. Sometimes 3 a day, sometimes none, sometimes 12 in a panicked cluster. They came running, walking, limping, carrying children, supporting wounded. And I stood at the gate, or Celia stood, or Marcus stood, following my protocols, and we checked. Arms, necks, legs. Anywhere fabric was torn. Anywhere blood showed. The infected couldn't cross the fence line on their own. The territory's boundary was absolute, but a bitten person still alive could walk right through. They were still human, still warm, still filling space the way the living fill space. The fence didn't discriminate between bitten and turning and clean. That was my job. In 3 weeks, I quarantined 11 people in Warehouse B. 11 individuals who arrived with wounds they couldn't explain or explain too quickly or hid under clothing until I found them. Each one went into the same building, given water and supplies and the same measured kindness, the same locked door, the same final trajectory playing out on camera 19 over hours or days while I watched from my room and felt something in me calcify one layer at a time. 9 of the 11 turned. 9 people who I locked in a building knowing the statistical likelihood, knowing what I was really doing, was building a collection of the doomed in a concrete box. 2 didn't turn. I let them out after 72 hours of observation, and they walked back into the community and never looked at me the same way. They were alive because I'd been cautious. They hated me because I'd been right to be cautious about them. Both things were true simultaneously, and neither canceled the other. And every night, when I walked to the East Wing, the figure was there. It never entered the occupied buildings. It never showed itself to anyone but me. It never did anything that I could point to and say, there, that's the evil. That's the threat. That's the thing we should fight. It just existed. It just held the territory. It just watched me work. And every visit, it said less. By the 3rd week, our conversations had reduced to near silence. I'd arrive. It would nod. I'd stand in the cold for 5 minutes. I'd leave. Like clocking in. Like reporting to a supervisor who trusts you enough to stop checking your work. Celia confronted me on day 19. She waited until we were alone in the monitoring room. 3 a.m., the hour when the building breathed and no one else was awake. She turned from the screens and faced me with an expression I recognized from my second marriage. The look of someone who has assembled their evidence and is no longer asking questions. I've been watching your pattern on the cameras, Owen. Every night you go east. Every night you stand in that alley for 5 to 7 minutes. Then you come back. What's in the East Wing? I told her. Not all at once, it came in pieces, in answers to her questions, in corrections when she assumed wrong. But I told her everything. The figure, the voice, the territory, the appetite for vacated space, the offer, the implicit transaction. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It's not keeping us safe, is it? We're keeping ourselves safe. It's just the landlord. It owns the building. We live here. But the thing protecting us from the infected is just it doesn't want to share." That's what I think, yes. And the quarantine, Warehouse B, that was your idea? Yes, but it approves. I stopped, thought about the nod, the silence, the not needing to say. It approves. Owen. She moved closer, not intimately, strategically, lowering her voice below the range of anyone who might be awake in the next room. It approves because every choice you make that maintains this system is a choice that maintains its system. You're not a guard. You're groundskeeper for something that eats real estate. Every person you bring in adds to its inventory. Every person you lock in Warehouse B is a person whose space it knows will open eventually. You're not protecting us from it. You're organizing us for it. I should have argued. I should have said no. The quarantine saves lives. The gate saves lives. The system works because of me, not because of it. But I couldn't. Because I'd walked to that alley every night for 3 weeks. And every night the figure had grown more comfortable, more silent, more like a supervisor who trusts his employee. And trust from something like that isn't earned by resistance. It's earned by alignment. What do I do? I asked her. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I wasn't the one making the decision. I was asking someone else to tell me. And the relief of that, the sheer weight that lifted in delegating, told me how much I'd been carrying. "You stop going east," she said. "You stop reporting to it. You keep doing what you're doing, the gate, the protocols, the cameras, but you do it for us, not for it. The choices stay the same. The reason changes. Does that matter? If the choices are identical?" She looked at camera 14, the empty loading dock, the nothing that wasn't nothing. "It matters to you," she said, "and it might matter to it. A dog that hunts for its own dinner is a different animal than a dog that hunts for a master, even if it catches the same rabbit." I didn't go east that night, or the next night, or the one after. On the fourth night, the temperature inside the monitoring room dropped 10 degrees. The figure appeared on camera 14 at 3:41 a.m., standing at the loading dock, facing the lens. Its mouth was open, in the shape of a word. Owen. I still run the gate. It's been 7 months. 63 people became 109, then stabilized when the infected finally started decomposing in the Georgia summer and the immediate danger radius contracted. The fence still holds. The territory still repels. Whatever lives in the East Wing hasn't spoken to me since I stopped visiting. But I feel it the way you feel the foundation under a house constant, supporting, uninterested in your opinion of its existence. Celia was right that the reason matters. She was wrong that changing it would change anything. I still sort the living from the bitten. I still lock Warehouse B. I still watch Camera 19. Every choice I make independently is a choice that something else would have chosen for me if I'd let it. And I cannot tell the difference between autonomy and alignment when the outputs are identical. That's what I carry. Not guilt, not dread, not the ringing silence of a horror I survived. Just the question looping, permanent, unanswerable, of whether choosing for myself and choosing for it were ever actually different. Whether every door I open is a door I'm opening, or a door that was always going to open with my hand on the handle because something understood me well enough to never need to ask. I'm still watching the cameras. They don't show what's worse anymore. They just show me.